iron bars, open hearts. The first time Maya saw her, she was bleeding. Not from a wound, not from a fight, but from something far deeper. The kind of bleeding that happens behind the eyes. In the hollow chest. In the part of a person that used to believe the world had some mercy left in it. Maya had been inside Lakeview Correctional Facility for 11 months when Selene arrived. Shoved through the intake door with her, wrists in cuffs and her chin held so defiantly high that it looked like armor. She was tall, dark-haired, with eyes the color of deep water after a storm. And when the guard pushed her forward too hard and she stumbled, she didn't cry out. She simply steadied herself, squared her shoulders, and stared straight ahead as if the humiliation had bounced right off her. Maya watched from across the corridor and felt something stir in the sediment of her chest. Something she had believed was long dead. Maya had not always been the kind of woman who noticed things. Before Lakeview, before the trial that dismantled her life piece by piece. She had been a nurse's aide in a small Ohio town. She had been someone's daughter, someone's neighbor, someone's quiet friend. She had made coffee in the mornings and watched the sun come up over soybean fields. And she had believed, with the simple faith of someone who had never been betrayed by the world, that goodness eventually found its way to good people. Then her boyfriend had planted stolen money in her apartment, without her knowledge. Then the police had come. Then her public defender had barely learned her name before her sentencing. And then there was Lakeview, with its fluorescent lights that buzzed like trapped insects, and its concrete walls painted the precise shade of hopelessness. By the time Selene arrived, Maya had built herself into something small and inward. She spoke when spoken to. She worked her laundry detail without complaint. She read paperback novels with cracked spines that circulated through the cell, blocked like tired rumors. She had learned the architecture of invisibility, how to occupy space without demanding anything from it. She had stopped expecting kindness. She had stopped expecting much of anything. And then Selene was placed in the cell beside hers, and the wall between them was both absolute and paper-thin. In the early days, they communicated the way all prisoners do when they are still wary of each other. In small, careful offerings. Selene had been convicted of fraud, a white-collar crime that had somehow landed her in a medium-security facility due to a jurisdictional tangle her attorney had never untangled. She was educated, precise in her speech, and had a way of looking at people as though she was reading them. Chapter titles of their lives, without yet committing to the full story. Maya found herself wanting to be a story worth reading. That was how it started, and with the wanting, they began talking through the narrow gap beneath their adjoining cell wall, passing words back and forth in the dark. Hours after lights out, when the block settled into its restless, aching quiet, Selene talked about her mother in Guadalajara and the garden of bougainvillea she had grown up beside. Maya talked about the nursing home where she had worked, about an elderly patient named Mr. Harold, who had held her hand one afternoon and told her she had the kind of soul that made rooms feel safer. They spoke in whispers, but the words carried weight far beyond their volume. There is an intimacy that exists only in darkness, only between people who have nothing left to perform for. And in those nights beneath the buzzing quiet of Lakeview, Maya and Selene found it. If you believe that kindness and love can exist in even the darkest of places, take a moment right now to share this story with someone who needs to be reminded of that truth. Because the world needs more people who carry that belief, and so does this story. It was a Tuesday in late February when Maya first understood what was happening inside her. The recreation yard was covered in a thin gray frost, and the women were permitted 30 minutes of outdoor time between shifts. Maya had found a corner near the chain-link fence where the morning light came in at an angle that almost felt like something from the life she used to have. Selene found her there without being directed, as though she had been navigating toward Maya by some internal compass that neither of them had consciously acknowledged. They stood side by side, not quite touching, watching the frost melt in slow, invisible increments from the pavement. Selene said something quiet about how light always finds a way to undo the coldest things, and Maya had looked at her profile. The strong jaw, the slight furrow between her brows, the way her breath made small clouds in the freezing air, and felt something crack open in her chest like a window thrown wide. She had not felt warmth in so long that she had forgotten it had a physical quality. a spreading golden weight. She felt it then, standing against a chain-link fence in a prison yard, and it terrified her. The terror was not about loving another woman. Maya had known that truth about herself quietly for years, had packed it into the back of a drawer, the way you pack something valuable you do not yet know how to use. The terror was about loving anyone at all, inside a place designed to strip humanity down to its most managed, most surveilled, most controlled form. Love inside prison was dangerous not because of the rules, though there were rules, but because it made you vulnerable in an environment that punished. Vulnerability without mercy. To care about someone behind bars was to hand them the only weapon you could not afford to have turned against you, the ability to matter. But Selene mattered, despite every calculation Maya made against it, despite every internal argument she assembled with the precision of someone who had learned to protect herself. Through sheer rational discipline, Selene mattered. And slowly, the way seasons change in places that barely seem to have them, what existed between them deepened past friendship, past comfort, into something that did not have a safe or simple name. There were harder months. A new guard with, something to prove made their lives deliberately difficult. After noticing their closeness, Selene was transferred to a different work detail on the other side of the facility. For 6 weeks they barely spoke, barely passed in hallways, and Maya felt the absence as a kind of weather, cold and pervasive and indifferent to her suffering. She lay on her bunk at night and stared at the ceiling and thought about what it meant to have found something irreplaceable in a place that had been designed to take everything away. She thought about Selene's voice reading aloud from a newspaper, about the way Selene pressed her forehead to the wall between their cells when words ran out and she simply wanted Maya to know she was there. She thought about the particular way Selene looked at her, not past her, not through her, but at her with the full and deliberate attention of someone who had decided she was worth seeing. When they were finally permitted proximity again, following a shift in facility, staffing that reassigned the hostel guard to another block, neither of them pretended the 6 weeks had been manageable. Selene took one look at Maya's face across the common room and crossed the distance between them with quiet urgency. And when they sat together at the corner table near the window, Selene reached across and covered Maya's hand with her own, briefly, deliberately, in full awareness of where they were and what it cost. It was the most tender moment Maya had experienced in years. It was also the most honest. She turned her hand over beneath Selene's and held on. Love in confinement is not diminished by its confinement. That is perhaps the most important thing Maya learned inside Lakeview, and she learned it the way all the most essential truths are learned, not through being told, but through surviving the evidence. What she and Selene built between them was not a diminished version of love, not a desperation-born imitation of it. It was full and specific and rooted in the deep knowledge that comes only from witnessing someone in their most unguarded form. They had seen each other afraid and humiliated, and sick with longing for lives that had been taken from them. They had held each other's grief without flinching, and that kind of witness, the unflinching, present, chosen kind, is not something that walls can manufacture or diminish. It simply is. It persists. Selene's appeal came through on a cold March morning 18 months after she had arrived at Lakeview. The charge that had given the prosecutor extra leverage was overturned on procedural grounds, and her sentence was reduced to time served. Maya learned about it when Selene appeared at her cell door, with an expression that was equal parts joy and devastation, radiant with relief, and breaking with the knowledge of what leaving meant. They had very little time, and they spent it the way people spend the last pages of a beloved book, slowly, deliberately, trying to memorize every detail before it ended. Selene told Maya that what they had built was not something she would set down at the gate. She said it clearly, without drama. The way she said all the things that mattered most. Maya believed her. Not because she was naive, but because she had watched Selene choose honesty even when pretending would have been easier, even when the truth came at a cost. And she knew it was not in Selene's nature to offer words she did not intend to keep. Maya still had time left on her sentence. She watched Selene walk out through the processing corridor on a Tuesday morning, when the light was thin and pale and almost beautiful. and she felt the grief of it move through her like a tide, enormous and real, and somehow, underneath it all, suffused with gratitude, because she had been here, in this hard and lightless place, and she had been loved. She had been seen. She had offered her truest self to someone who had recognized it and held it with care. That was not nothing. In a place that tried to make everything nothing, that was extraordinary. Please leave a comment below telling us what part of Maya and Selene's story moved you the most. Your words matter more than you know, and they remind every person watching that they are not alone in believing that love is worth every cost. In the years that followed, letters traveled between Ohio and Guadalajara with the steady faithfulness of something that had decided not to be temporary. Maya's release came on a morning in August, when the air smelled like warm asphalt and cut grass and every ordinary, magnificent thing she had missed. There was a woman waiting in the parking lot outside the gate, standing in the particular angle of summer light that makes ordinary moments look like the closing scene of something important. Selene had driven 16 hours. She had brought coffee in a thermos and bougainvillea, pressed between two pieces of wax paper, dried from her mother's garden, and when Maya walked through that gate, and the distance between them collapsed, neither of them spoke for a long time. They simply stood in the light, holding on. Two women who had found each other in the darkest of places and had, against every reasonable expectation, carried that love all the way back into the world. Some things cannot be taken away. Even iron bars, even concrete walls, even the coldest and most calculated systems of punishment cannot reach into the place where one human being decides that another is worth knowing, worth staying for, worth the full and terrifying weight of love. Maya and Selene did not become extraordinary in spite of where they met. They became extraordinary because of what they chose every single day, in a place that gave them every reason to choose nothing at all. If this story reached something in you, and if it reminded you that love is stubborn and human and impossibly resilient, then please like this video and share it with someone whose heart needs to hear that even in the hardest places, warmth finds a way through.